You know who I am?
Sir, I need your license and registration.
I am a Supreme Court Justice. You should think carefully before continuing.
Your title does not change the law. I need your information.
You'll regret this.
The night air was thick, humid, and still, except for the low hum of traffic on the empty highway. A black SUV rolled slowly behind a sleek silver sedan, its lights dimmed. Inside the SUV, the driver adjusted his mirror, eyes narrowing as he caught a flash of movement ahead. A sudden flash of red and blue lit up the rearview mirror. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this, especially not tonight. The sedan slowed, pulling over to the shoulder. The SUV followed, tires crunching on gravel. The officer stepped out, uniform crisp, badge gleaming in the streetlight. He approached the sedan cautiously, flashlight in hand. The driver inside, a man in his 60s, perfectly dressed, radiated authority. The kind of authority that made people hesitate before speaking. "Evening, officer," the man said smoothly, voice calm, but carrying a weight that seemed to fill the air. The officer cleared his throat. "License and registration, please." "You were swerving back there." The man's eyes flicked up, meeting the officer's. "Do you know who I am?" His tone wasn't a question. It was a warning. A declaration. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The officer, a black man who had seen his share of tense stops, felt the shift immediately. This wasn't just any driver. There was a presence, a gravity, that made people instinctively step back. "Sir, I need your information," the officer said, voice steady despite the rising tension. "Traffic violation." The man leaned back slightly, one hand resting casually on the steering wheel. "I am a Supreme Court Justice. I suggest you consider that before continuing this conversation." The officer's jaw tightened. He had trained for situations like this, for people who tried to use power to intimidate. But hearing it, seeing it, made something deep inside flare. He wasn't just a uniform. He was a protector of the law. And right now, the law was on thin ice. A pause. A quiet that seemed to stretch for minutes. The officer swallowed, forcing himself to breathe normally. "I understand who you are, sir. That doesn't change the fact that you were swerving and putting others at risk. I'm going to need your license and registration now." The man's fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel. "You'll regret this. Do you understand me?" The officer's eyes never wavered. "Sir, I enforce the law. Your title doesn't change that." The man smirked faintly, a flash of arrogance in his gaze. "Enforce it then. But remember, I can make things very difficult for you." At that moment, the officer felt the weight of his position like never before. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and this traffic stop could become headline news, fast. But backing down wasn't an option. "Before continuing, I want to ask, where are you watching from right now? And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. It really helps support the channel and lets us bring you more stories like this." The sedan's engine hummed quietly. The officer reached slowly for his notepad, hands steady despite the adrenaline. "I just need your information to complete the stop. That's all." The man laughed softly, almost a whisper. "All right. But you'd better be careful how you handle this. Everyone in this room is watching, metaphorically speaking." The tension hung thick between them. Every second felt like a minute. Every breath carried the weight of history, power, and unspoken rules. The officer knew this wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was a test. And failing wasn't an option. The officer finally held out his hand. "License and registration, please." The man's fingers hesitated on the wallet in his pocket. His eyes scanned the road behind them, then back at the officer. Then slowly, deliberately, he pulled out his ID. The SUV's headlights caught the glint of metal and a badge, and for a moment, the officer just stared at the Supreme Court Justice sitting there. The encounter was brief, but the tension it carried was enough to leave both men aware that the night had just changed everything. But neither knew how much farther it would go. The following morning, the officer sat in the precinct, replaying the night's events over and over. He had filed the report, but every word felt inadequate. There was a weight to what had happened, an authority that tried to bend the law just by existing. His phone buzzed. A text from a colleague. "You okay? Heard about last night." He hesitated, then typed back a simple, "It's fine. Just strange." It wasn't fine. The word felt hollow. Something about that encounter gnawed at him, the calm, controlled menace behind the justice's words. "Do you know who I am?" Those 6 words had carried a threat that no traffic citation could contain. By mid-morning, the story had begun circulating quietly. The justice had a reputation for intimidation behind closed doors, whispers in the corridors of power. Few dared challenge him, even in small matters. And yet, here was a black officer who had stood his ground, demanding accountability. Later that afternoon, the officer received a call from Internal Affairs. "We're opening a routine inquiry into the incident. Just your statement for now." Routine. They called it routine, but everyone knew the real meaning. A Supreme Court justice. This was no small matter. It wasn't just about a traffic stop. It was about power, influence, and the law itself. The officer drove to the designated office, mind sharp. He rehearsed every word, every detail. Nothing could be left to chance. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A single lamp lit the desk where 2 investigators sat, pens poised over notebooks. "Take a seat," one of them said. "We just need to go over what happened last night." He nodded. "I'll tell it exactly as it happened." He recounted the stop, the justice's tone, the words, "Do you know who I am?" He spoke slowly, deliberately, emphasizing that at no point did he threaten or act aggressively. Just the facts. One of the investigators frowned. "This is unusual. Supreme Court justices rarely get involved in incidents like this. Did he use his position to intimidate you?" "Yes," the officer said, meeting their eyes. "Absolutely. It wasn't just words. It was the presence, the implication. I had to remain professional, but he clearly expected me to step back." The investigators scribbled notes, exchanged quiet looks. One whispered to the other, "We need to tread carefully." Outside, news began to trickle in. Social media picked up on the story. A few clips of the encounter surfaced from the traffic camera, blurry but enough to see the standoff. Comments exploded, some supportive of the officer, some defending the justice. The debate was raw, heated, and deeply polarized. That night, the officer returned home, exhausted. His mind replayed the confrontation again. Then the phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated. "Officer," a deep voice said, calm but commanding. "We need to talk." He froze. The justice himself. The line was tense, each word measured. "I want to understand why you acted as you did. Do you know what this could mean for you?" The officer drew a slow breath. "Sir, I followed the law. I acted professionally. That's my responsibility." There was a pause, almost a weight pressing through the phone. "Then, you are lucky you did. Very lucky. Most people don't have your courage or your restraint. But remember, this does not end here." The call ended abruptly. Silence. The officer sat back, heart pounding. The justice was not finished. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the precinct was alive with tension. Investigators were cautious, officers whispered in corners. The officer's colleagues admired his professionalism, but worried about what came next. A Supreme Court justice had been directly challenged, and in a way that few could imagine. Hours later, in the justice's private chambers, aides whispered in hurried tones. "He didn't back down," one said. A black officer, standing firm. This could set a precedent. The justice leaned back, expression unreadable. Then we'll see how far he's willing to go. Everyone has a breaking point. Meanwhile, the officer prepared for a meeting with legal counsel. The sense of danger was real, but so was the resolve. He would not let intimidation dictate his actions. The law, the truth, and his own integrity mattered more than any threat. And yet, in the back of his mind, he knew this was just the beginning. The justice's influence stretched far. His network was deep. And the standoff from that night, the simple question, "Do you know who I am?" would ripple through every decision, every interaction, every tense moment to come. The officer's phone buzzed again. Another text from a colleague. "You're stronger than I would be. Watch your back." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. His focus was clear. The justice had power. He had authority. But he had the law on his side, and he wasn't about to let it bend for anyone. Days passed, but the tension never eased. Every time the officer stepped into the precinct, whispers followed. His colleagues tried to stay supportive but wary. Some avoided eye contact, as if proximity could somehow drag them into the storm. The investigation into the traffic stop had officially escalated. Internal Affairs requested interviews, bodycam footage, and witness statements. And though the officer had followed every protocol, the weight of the justice's position pressed down, unseen but heavy. Then came the summons. Not for a routine hearing, but a private meeting at a secured location arranged by the justice's aides. The officer's heart pounded. He knew this wasn't just about clearing paperwork. It was a calculated move, meant to intimidate and test him. When he arrived, the room was stark, lit with harsh overhead lights. The justice sat behind a long desk, expression calm, fingers steepled. No aides, just the two of them. The officer stood, hands at his sides ready. "Sit," the justice said, voice measured but sharp. "I'll keep this brief. I need to understand why you challenged me the other night." The officer took a seat, maintaining eye contact. "Sir, I pulled you over because you were swerving. I asked for your license and registration. That's my duty. I treated you like any other driver, nothing more." The justice's gaze narrowed, studying him like a puzzle. "And yet, you didn't hesitate. You stood firm. Most people would have apologized, stepped aside, given in." "I did not give in," the officer said steadily. "I followed the law. That is my responsibility, regardless of who the person is in front of me." The justice leaned back, a faint smirk appearing. Courageous. Perhaps too courageous. A tense silence followed. Both men measured the air, the stakes, the power in the room. Finally, the justice spoke again. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" The officer's voice was calm, but unwavering. "I understand that challenging someone in power comes with risks. But I also understand that ignoring the law for the sake of someone's title is wrong." For a moment, the justice was silent, studying him. Then he leaned forward, eyes locking on the officer's. "You could ruin your career. You could make enemies who will watch your every move. And yet, you still stand your ground. Why?" "Because the law applies to everyone," the officer said firmly. "If the law bends for one person because of their status, then it fails everyone else. I cannot allow that." The justice regarded him in silence again, almost as if calculating a response. Finally, he leaned back, exhaling. "Very well. You have impressed me, though I don't say that lightly. You may leave for now. But know this, the world you are stepping back into will test you at every turn." The officer rose carefully. "Thank you, sir. I will do my duty." Outside, the air felt lighter, though the city itself seemed unchanged. The officer knew that nothing would erase the tension entirely. The justice had immense influence, but for the first time, the officer realized that his own integrity was stronger than fear. In the days that followed, news quietly circulated about the incident. Some outlets portrayed the officer as steadfast, standing firm against intimidation. Others highlighted the justice's caution and measured response. The story sparked conversation about accountability, authority, and the courage to uphold the law even under pressure. At the precinct, the officer returned to his duties, more aware than ever of the fine line between power and responsibility. Colleagues began to treat him with renewed respect, though the undercurrent of tension remained. One evening, after a long shift, the officer sat alone, reflecting. The memory of that night, the red and blue lights, the words, "Do you know who I am?" The confrontation that could have escalated, still felt vivid. But alongside it was a sense of clarity. Courage wasn't loud or flashy. It wasn't about winning or proving someone wrong. It was about standing firm, even when the stakes were highest. He looked out the window at the city lights and thought about the justice, the power he wielded, the world that tried to bend rules for some but not for others. And he knew this. Integrity was the only shield that could withstand such forces. For the officer, the night had tested him like nothing else. He had faced authority, intimidation, and a storm of potential consequences. And he had endured, not by force, but by holding true to the law, his conscience, and his own sense of justice. The city continued to move around him, oblivious to the quiet battles being fought within it. But one truth remained: courage, integrity, and standing firm, even against the most powerful, could ripple far beyond a single night, a single traffic stop, or a single question. Do you know who I am? And in that truth, the officer found a quiet victory, one that no title, no threat, and no power could ever take away.